Today going to do an oil change on a 2009 Electraglide Harley-Davidson. It's up on the jack already. You don't have to do that. You do want to get it upright at some point in time to make sure that the oil drains properly and that you eventually measure the quantities properly. But for the moment it is on a jack. These are not the stablest of jacks in the world, and so you do want to be careful, particularly if you're working alone, because you don't want it to tumble on top of you. And so I'm going to spend a minimum of time around it. I'm going to be pretty careful about how I position myself. So let's start by figuring out where the oil drain plug is. You can see right there what they call the clutch inspection cover on the left hand side of the bike. And if you go pretty much straight underneath that, first of all here you'll see the frame, and underneath that you'll see a rectangular-ish box, and you can see two screws there. You don't want to touch the center one, you want to touch the one on the side here. It's 5/8 nut, and that is your drain. It's a little tricky getting it to drain without going everywhere if you've got it on any type of a rig like I've got here, a jack, because you get pieces in the way. I'm going to try to do it on here with this type of funnel that they sell that may make it easier, or I may end up lowering it again and simply draining the oil by trying to hold the bike up and undo the plug there. When I say hold the bike up, I guess I mean hold it upright on its two wheels. So 5/8 inch, and you open that. There's an O-ring underneath it that you don't want to lose, and that is your oil drain, and that's the first step. As you can see, I've lowered it off the jack. It was just too difficult to rig up something to catch the oil underneath that. You can catch it if you've got it leaned over this way. You'll eventually want to make sure that you level the bike at some point, just to make sure that you are draining all the oil. But at this point in time, I will undo the screw that I showed you earlier and drain the oil. As you can see, it's flowing fairly well. Underneath there, it's been going for a few minutes, and so the flow slowed down. You really do need to open the filler cap on this in order to break the suction, otherwise it goes pretty slowly. But you just want to drain that. If you're doing it on the ground like I am, you're going to want to hold the bike so that it's level at some point in time in the process here, and just make sure that you're not losing anything. What you'll see here is the drain plug nut. You'll notice that there's actually not very much metal that's accumulated on the magnet, which is always a good sign. It's a little different with the gear and clutch assembly. Every once in a while you'll get some metal shavings in there, but nothing on there. You'll notice the O-ring, the rubber one. Make sure that's on it, because you don't want to accidentally lose that in the oil or have it left on and when you initially pull it off and then have it fall off later, because if that happens you can end up with a leak. But that is what the nut looks like. That is for the drain plug. I've reinserted the drain plug. You do that by finger tightening it first. Always do that. I expect most of you will know that already, but in case you're doing it for the first time and haven't heard that before, finger tighten it first, because you do not want to cross thread it. Once you've got it fully in and you're absolutely certain it's not cross threaded, then you can tighten it with a wrench or with a ratchet, and that's what I'll do now. I'm sure there are some torque specs to do this, but I'm just doing it so that it's tight enough that it's not going to leak on the one hand, and not so tight that it starts stripping it on the other hand. And again, it's 5/8 inch. This is one of the trickier and more annoying parts of changing an oil on a Harley, is that you have to take this off, and there's really very few ways short of buying a special adapter to avoid having oil leak out a bit. You're going to open this, obviously it's going to drain, so you need something underneath to catch it. You can see I've got the pan there. There is an adapter that slides underneath this that catches most of the oil, but not always all of it. And if you buy that, you'll be a little happier. But if you don't, you're just going to have to do like me and put a paper towel underneath it and go from there. This is a handy little setup from Harley-Davidson that allows you to get in there and to remove the filter just because of the angle and location. Well worth the money in my experience. So you can see here where I've unscrewed the old oil filter from. I've cleaned up around it. You'll notice the stainless steel there. That's important to be able to see that you did not accidentally leave the rubber ring stuck onto the old, from the old filter on there. If you do that, you will definitely have a leak. It won't seal properly. And you'll see here that I have a thin film of oil on the rubber, and I'm just going to hand tighten that now. Now I've replaced the filter, having oiled the rubber sealing ring around it, hand tightened it fairly tightly but not to the point of stripping any screws, replaced the drain plug, and now I have a funnel in the oil reservoir, as you can see, and I'm about to pour in roughly 3.79 liters or 4 quarts roughly of oil into it. I'll start checking somewhere around 3 1/4, 3 1/2 just to make sure that I've got everything set up right. So here we go. Once you've finished all those steps, you've put the drain plug back in, you've filled it with the right amount of oil, you've closed the filler cap, you've replaced the filter and tightened it to an appropriate point. Then you start the engine, bring it up to about 2,500 RPMs or so is what I do for maybe about 15 or 20, 30 seconds. And then just make sure that there's no oil leaking from anywhere that shouldn't be leaking. Once you've done that, you are finished.